Hey everyone, welcome back to MangaMinute. I'm thrilled to share my latest recap video with you. If you missed the previous one, no worries, just take a quick peek in the description below for the link. Now, let's dive right in and enjoy.
Emilia launched a swift and devastating attack on Malfoy, striking with such speed and precision that he had no chance to defend himself. The force of her assault left him severely injured, a deep gash marking the aftermath of her brutal strike. Malfoy staggered, barely able to comprehend the onslaught, his body trembling under the weight of the unexpected blow. From the sidelines, Malfoy's subordinates looked on with growing concern, their faces etched with worry as they witnessed their master's vulnerability. Dago Cthulhu, loyal and fierce, stood frozen for a moment before a surge of panic crossed his face. Beside him, William remained composed, his gaze steady as he silently observed the scene unfolding before him. Despite the severity of the attack, William's confidence in Malfoy remained unshaken. Though the others faltered in their faith, his calm demeanor suggested a deep belief in their master's resilience. To him, the strike was merely a momentary setback, a test of strength that Malfoy would soon overcome. With a weary expression, Emilia surveyed the battlefield, exhaling in relief as she finished off her enemies. She believed it was over, convinced she had defeated Malfoy. However, just as she was about to call it a day, Malfoy's broken body began to regenerate before her eyes. His form reassembled, and he rose, his voice booming with a twisted admiration. Emilia's success had clearly impressed him, but his words carried an undertone of curiosity. He questioned her sudden awakening from a long slumber, hinting at a deeper reason behind her return, perhaps a search for someone named Master Elizabeth. Emilia, momentarily caught off guard by Malfoy's regeneration, stepped closer, her expression shifting from victory to surprise. But before she could close the distance, the ground beneath her erupted, and thick, writhing tentacles shot up, entangling her mid-step. It was Dago Cthulhu, Malfoy's second-in-command, using his signature ability, Taboo Tentacles. With pride in his voice, Dago reveled in the belief that this was his chance to claim the title of Lord of Demons by defeating Emilia. He had trapped her, sealing her magic and immobilizing her in the dark sea, confident that no matter how strong she was, there would be no escape. But Emilia, seemingly unfazed by his proclamation, responded in an unexpected way. Without hesitation, she bit into one of the tentacles, her resolve unshaken. Dago, initially amused by what he deemed a futile struggle, mocked her, believing that her effort to consume him was pointless. He taunted her, claiming that she had no understanding of the scale of his power, that she was overestimating herself. Yet, to his horror, Emilia continued to devour his tentacles with unnerving ease, treating the monstrous limbs as if they were no more than a simple meal. In an instant, she had consumed them all, leaving Dago Cthulhu in a state of utter disbelief. His confidence shattered, and in a desperate, trembling voice, he called out to Malfoy for help, realizing far too late that he had gravely underestimated Emilia. After effortlessly defeating her opponent, Emilia casually munched on the remaining tentacles in her mouth, remarking on her hunger after a long slumber. Her demeanor remained calm, almost indifferent, despite the chaos that had unfolded around her. As she savored her victory, Ruth Bader cautiously approached, her hands raised in a gesture of surrender. She claimed to have been forced into the battle, aligning herself with Malfoy and his forces against her will. Her voice trembled with apparent submission as she neared Emilia, but her intentions were far more sinister. Hidden beneath her facade, Ruth secretly cast an enchantment, Seductive Kiss, a spell designed to take control of Emilia's will. The spell appeared to work flawlessly, and Ruth's expression darkened with grim satisfaction. She believed she had succeeded where others had failed, confident that Emilia was now under her control and bound to her commands. Yet, unknown to Ruth, the spell had no effect on Emilia. With a single, swift motion, Emilia shattered Ruth's illusions of triumph. Her fist struck Ruth with decisive force, sending her flying across the battlefield. As Emilia felt Dago Cthulhu struggling desperately inside her stomach, she made a mocking remark about his futile attempts to escape. She knew his power was no match for her, and with a single, decisive resolve, she prepared to digest him completely, ending his struggle once and for all. Meanwhile, William, the last of Malfoy's subordinates still standing, watched the scene with growing excitement. The fact that Amelia had not only killed the vice leader but also severely injured Malfoy stirred something within him. His thrill at the escalating conflict was unmistakable, and he saw this as an opportunity to test his own strength against the powerful Amelia. Without hesitation, William launched himself at her, unleashing his Demon King's skill liberation, a fierce attack meant to overwhelm his enemies. But Amelia, unfazed and uninterested in his efforts, merely waved her hand in his direction. The force of that simple gesture was enough to send William flying back, his initial assault effortlessly deflected. However, William was relentless. Driven by his tenacity, he recovered quickly and prepared for another strike. This time, he channeled all of his power into his ultimate move, 100% energy release. It was his most devastating attack, one that had never failed him before. But even with his full power unleashed, the result remained unchanged. Amelia, with the same casual ease, defeated him, his efforts proving no more effective than before. Amelia strode forward, her gaze locked on Malfoy, her voice sharp and cutting as she spoke. She taunted him, questioning whether he had truly believed he could replace their master by assembling such weak forces. To her, Malfoy wasn't even worth the effort of a battle, not in her current state of power. Malfoy, unfazed by her words, responded with a twisted mix of envy and sarcasm. He acknowledged her newfound status as Demon King, offering hollow congratulations. His tone dripped with bitterness as he lamented his human limitations, unable to reach the heights that Amelia now effortlessly commanded. Despite his words of respect, a mocking undertone hinted at deeper malice. Irritation flashed across Amelia's face. She had no patience for his games and made it clear, her voice cold as steel. She demanded a decision from him, whether he would submit to the inevitable or continue harboring the delusion that he could challenge her. Malfoy's expression darkened, a grim smile twisting his features. His laugh was hollow as he mocked the very idea of standing against her. He admitted, with false humility, that he wouldn't dare oppose Lady Amelia. But then, his gaze shifted, and with a cruel smirk, he gestured to something behind him. His tone dripped with menace as he hinted that the odds might change if a certain her were to be added to the equation. Amelia's eyes widened in shock, realizing the danger of what Malfoy intended. Her voice, now filled with fury, cursed him as she recognized the twisted plot unfolding before her. Malfoy, unfazed by her reaction, leered at the impending moment. His voice, now laced with dark excitement, suggested that whatever he was waiting for hadn't yet reached its full potential. But soon it would be enough. Soon everything would change. Leping spent his days in the fields, plowing the soil, sowing seeds, and carefully tending to the plants with water until they bore fruit. Once the day's labor was done, he would return to his modest home, guided by his loyal electronic pet, Wang Chai. His daily routine was simple, cutting wood for the fire, preparing meals, and tending to his chores. Yet, despite the rhythm of his familiar tasks, something felt different. Leping moved through his work as if weighed down by an invisible burden, his mind distant and preoccupied. His hands continued to work, but his heart seemed elsewhere, consumed by thoughts that dulled his usual attentiveness. Day after day, this strange cloud followed him, until one particular evening. As he sat down to eat, the silence of the humble home was broken by a quiet realization. Elizabeth, watching him closely, noticed that something was undeniably wrong. The way he ate, the way he moved, all of it reflected the weight of whatever troubled his soul. With hollow eyes, Leping prepared for bed, but sleep evaded him. Restless and consumed by his thoughts, he suddenly sat up, a newfound resolve flickering within him. Murmuring to himself, he made a quiet decision. His voice, barely above a whisper, carried a sense of finality. He had made up his mind. The next morning, Leping moved through his routine, preparing breakfast with the same care as always, though a new tension clung to the air. As he served the meal, he spoke with a forced calmness, apologizing for the early disturbance and presenting the food to Elizabeth, urging her to enjoy it. Elizabeth, ever perceptive, immediately sensed the stiffness in his tone and the atmosphere around him. Her patience wore thin with his unspoken thoughts, and she bluntly pressed him to speak his mind, unwilling to tolerate any evasiveness. Gathering his courage, Leping finally voiced what had been weighing on him for so long. He reminded Elizabeth of the time they had spent together over the past year, living in uneasy peace. Despite their differences, despite being the hero and the demon queen, he believed they had proven that coexistence was possible. With that, Leping declared that it was time for Elizabeth to reclaim her power, to leave their quiet life behind and take control of the world once again. Elizabeth listened to his words, her reaction calm and distant. Her tone lacked enthusiasm, almost bored as she responded with a simple question, asking why? Leping spoke with a sense of resignation, explaining the thoughts that had weighed on him. He admitted that his original plan was to live a quiet and peaceful life in hiding, far away from the chaos of the outside world. Nestled in the safety of the novice village, he had hoped to escape the larger conflicts, but fate had other plans. The system's prophecy about the inevitable encounter between the hero and the demon queen had come true, despite his efforts to avoid it. Though he hadn't sought her out, Elizabeth had arrived at his doorstep, drawn into his life by circumstances beyond his control. He continued, recounting how the novice village's barrier had weakened, allowing 500 years to pass outside in what felt like no time. The world beyond had descended into chaos, with dark guilds rising in Elizabeth's absence. The peace he once knew was shattered, and the suffering of others, like Uncle Boss and Annie, was only a small glimpse of the devastation unfolding outside their small, isolated existence. Elizabeth listened, her tone indifferent as she questioned why any of this chaos mattered to them. From her perspective, none of it affected their lives. They were safe, untouched by the outside world's troubles. But Leping couldn't share that detachment. He acknowledged that, during this time, he had become entangled in the events due to the weakening of the barrier. He admitted that without Elizabeth by his side, he wouldn't have managed to maintain the life he had grown accustomed to. He confessed that if he were ignorant of what was happening in the outside world, he could have continued living peacefully, unbothered by the struggles beyond the village. But now that he knew, now that he had seen the suffering firsthand, he couldn't simply ignore it. His desire to avoid the role of a hero or to reject saving people from their pain no longer held any weight in the face of such overwhelming need. As Leping's words hung in the air, Elizabeth paused, her thoughts drifting. She began to wonder, her mind turning inward. Did he just say he couldn't live without me? Leping, his tone firm with newfound resolve, pressed Elizabeth to take control of the world once more. He acknowledged his shortcomings as a hero but declared that he could no longer afford to be selfish, urging her to bring order to the chaos outside their village. Yet inwardly, his thoughts betrayed a different motive. If the village was destroyed by monsters, he could always find a simple life in the city, far removed from the burdens of heroism. Elizabeth listened quietly, her expression indifferent. After finishing her meal, she responded to his plea with calm detachment, dismissing the chaos in the outside world as a minor issue. Her disinterest was clear, but Leping, catching a glimmer of hope, smiled widely and asked if she would agree to his plan, offering to help her pack and prepare for the task. Her response was swift and firm. Elizabeth had no intention of returning to rule the world, but instead of outright refusal, she presented two options to address the problem, her tone carrying a hint of challenge. Beneath her words, she quietly muttered to herself, suspecting that Leping's insistence was merely an excuse to push her away. It wouldn't be so easy, she thought to herself. Intrigued, Leping asked about the two ways she mentioned. Elizabeth elaborated with a cool detachment, offering the first solution, an extreme one. She suggested going out into the world and casting a powerful, world-destroying spell to eliminate the problem entirely. The idea was absurd, but her delivery was matter-of-fact, as if it were a simple and efficient solution. Leping quickly rejected the notion, his voice rising in alarm. Destroying the world was certainly not the answer, and he was quick to make that clear. Elizabeth, maintaining her composed demeanor, continued with her second option. She suggested finding a suitable person to rule the world in her place, someone she could guide from the shadows. The idea was practical, offering a way to address the chaos without her direct involvement. Leping, caught off guard, was confused by the proposal. He asked who this suitable person might be, unsure of what Elizabeth had in mind. Her response came with certainty, as if the answer was obvious. Aside from her, there was only one other person qualified for the task: Leping himself. Stunned, Leping recoiled at the suggestion. The idea of him ruling the world was beyond anything he had imagined. His voice, tinged with disbelief, reflected his shock as he questioned her intentions. The thought of him taking on such a monumental role left him grappling with the weight of what she was proposing.